Now beside me, we have our Porsche Macan Turbo, which you may have already seen a couple of videos on. We're gonna be showing you how to install the Cete automotive active suspension lowering module. The installation procedure is going to be pretty similar if you're using another lowering module from another company, because they all have to tie into the factory suspension control module, which is going to be on the right side of the Macan here in the trunk. So let's go ahead and remove some of these carpet panels, and then I'll show you how this connects. So here in the trunk, we're mainly gonna have to remove this panel right here, kind of peeling it back to get access to the module. It's gonna be right behind here approximately. To get this panel off, we're gonna have to remove the torque screws underneath the luggage carrier straps that are right here and here. And then we're also gonna have to unplug the LED light, which is right up here. And then the rest of this is gonna disconnect with a series of clips. So let's show you how that works. So the first thing I'm doing is removing these T30 screws that hold down the luggage carrier straps. There's a total of 4. We're gonna go ahead and get those out of the way. Then we're also gonna need to remove this panel right here for our trunk. We're gonna go ahead and put that out of the way. And you're also gonna have to remove this carpet panel back here. This is just gonna slide forward, and then we'll get it out of the way as well. Now with those 2 carpet panels removed, we can go ahead and remove this side piece. It's gonna come up like that. And then next up, you can go ahead and pop out this cover right here. Just a little bit of outward force should rotate and come off pretty easy. Don't forget to remove this connector right here. Now you can already start to see our suspension control module right here. We need to go ahead and remove this carpet panel, which is a part of this plastic trim up here, and that should give us access to the connectors on the backside so we can install our Cete lowering module. So now we need to remove this side carpet panel here. You're gonna have to first uninstall this LED side light, and that's just gonna clip out using a flathead screwdriver, and then you're gonna remove the connector for it and get that out of the way. So now with that LED out of the way, we can go ahead and start removing this side carpet panel. It looks like this plastic is a couple of different pieces, but actually it's all been plastic welded together, so it's all gonna come off together. In our scenario here, the carpet actually separated from the plastic upper piece, but that's no problem because when we reinstall everything, all the clips on the back end are gonna keep it secure and you won't be able to tell. Now here we have our Cete automotive harness. On one side, we have OEM plastic connectors. These ones are gonna go to the suspension control module. And on the other side, we have these metal connectors. These are gonna go to the chassis harness connectors and plug in. On the other side of the harness, you have this lone connector. We currently have a jumper plug installed, but once we remove this, you can install your Cete automotive module, and that's gonna complete the system. So to remove the connectors off the factory harness, they can be a little bit sticky. I'd recommend pulling up and sliding off the connector, and at the same time using a flathead screwdriver to pry a little bit to add that extra force in. You don't want to break these connectors, so be real gentle and take your time. Now with the connectors removed, we'll go ahead and install our new Cete harness. And on the other side of the harness, we're going to connect it to the chassis side. And now we're gonna remove this dummy plug. Remember, if you didn't want your car to be any lower, you could just install this dummy plug, and that way the car wouldn't think that any modification was being made. But we're gonna remove that now and install our Cete module. So there you have it, installation is complete. We're gonna go ahead and test out this unit before we put all the carpet pieces back up together. That way we know that our installation is 100%.
All right, so the Cete module has a free downloadable app for the iPhone or Android platform. It's called Active Sound, which is the parent company. You can see this is already paired with the Macan, but it just has a few basic settings and stuff to make the connection. And then once you're into the actual app here, it's pretty basic. You can program a show mode, which allows it to go further when the car is parked. We'll show that when we get out. But these are just dials that literally you can change to any increment you want. Now sometimes, just to let you know, sometimes a car will have to be on level ground for it to change position. Sometimes you might need to toggle through the different ride selector mode as well. And then obviously when you get out of the car and shut it off, sometimes it'll make the change. So just because you hit save settings and make the adjustment, sometimes it might have to actually be rolling a little bit or changing the mode for it to actually set effect. It's basically using the factory system and then setting a different signal and to basically control that value. So that's it. Let's get out of the car. I'll activate the show mode so you can kind of see what this looks like going down. All right, so now we're in the Macan, we're rolling. We have the seat module installed, and I set it to my personal preference, which is -20 millimeters at the front axle, -22 millimeters at the rear axle. I have it in a low mode. I just feel like that gives it the best look, just kind of a nice balanced look with maybe a slight little rake, but just kind of a nice aggressive look with these wheel spacers, and you know, not too low where you're gonna suffer ride quality issues or you know, worry about clearance issues. So first thing you'll notice, drives just like stock. This really doesn't feel too different in terms of the suspension. And taking just a little bit of a turn here, you can feel the center of the gravity of the vehicle being lower, so the car feels a little more planted. But in terms of the ride comfort and quality, it's very similar. Now I keep my Macan in the sport setting on the suspension. I generally drive in that mode. This does have Sport and Sport Plus on the PASM shocks. I rarely ever go into comfort, sometimes on a highway cruise, but let's just switch over to that just to lighten up the shocks a little bit. And you'll instantly feel that the car has less rebound in the shock, a little more floaty feeling, a little more isolated from the road. And then I'm gonna go back into my preferred sport mode, and then we'll go ahead and put it back down into Sport Plus. And this isn't the most perfect area of pavement. Obviously, nothing new here, traditional Porsche. You'll feel more coming through with that dampening on the PASM of the Sport Plus mode with the shocks. But we go back to the mode I usually drive in just to kind of give you a little more comparison. Yeah, like I said, car drives pretty standard to stock. Handles a little bit better in terms of the center of gravity being lower, but you're not going to really suffer any degradation in ride quality or comfort by being in a lower mode. Now again, I'm set at -20 millimeters in the front, -22 in the rear, which is, I believe, a nice drop. You know, it's kind of a midway point, maybe a little beyond midway, maybe 60% or so of what I would advise to drop the car. Some guys might want to run a little lower at 30 millimeters. That tends to, once you kind of pass that 30 mark, it tends to introduce a little bit, less comfort in terms of ride quality. This suspension doesn't have as much resistance. The spring rate effectively is lower, so the shocks start taking on more of the transmission of the road coming through, and that leads to a little bit poorer ride, but it does sit lower. We'll show you the show mode in this car too. So you can set a separate mode that basically you can activate when you get out of the car, so it lowers, in a parking spot, to a lower mode, and that's pretty cool. I lower mine down 35 millimeters, and I think that looks really nice when it's parked. But obviously, some guys might not have a problem riding with that. I mean, if you rode on a set of like cheap coilovers or something, maybe it kind of feels like that. But it does sacrifice a little bit of the ride quality when you go to the extremes. Cete does not recommend lowering it more than 35 millimeters while driving. I haven't tested beyond that point, and I wouldn't recommend doing it either. I'm not sure what the physical limits are of the car, but that just kind of is in a nutshell. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe and follow along to this build series. We have a lot more episodes coming out. And if you have questions on the Cete module or are interested in the product, it's available at flat6motorsports.com. We're always here to help. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.